This all starts, as crazy as it sounds, at least it seems like, in June of '03. The Observer would write, Foley called the WWE up recently and wanted to come back, although not to wrestle, at least for a short run. A lot of that is to get some visibility at the time for his novel Tatum Brown, which is coming out. Combined with him being gone for so long, he'd be a fresh character. No decision was made as of June 1st, but everyone, including me, presumes he'll be the referee for Hell in a Cell, and it'll be announced on June 9th. Foley had been doing voiceovers for TNN, as you could hear him constantly if you watch the network. Boy, the timing of that, given a conversation we just had.
Right before we went on the air, yeah. I was talking about my voice work for TNN. So in some ways, I was on the WWE show more when I was absent than I was when I was there, because I was on 4 or 5 different times a show doing the voiceovers, and it was never acknowledged that it was me. But so I still had my finger on the pulse. I had left under less than ideal circumstances, as a lot of us do, and that was October 2001, I had left under less than ideal circumstances, involving, of all things, a children's book. This is the Halloween Hijinks. And I had gone on to talk about Foley is Good. And as soon as I got on the Today Show, it's amazing how important the New York Times is in the bigger scheme of things, and how much of the world, the artistic world, revolves around it. Because even with Have a Nice Day having done so well and hit #1, I've got this follow-up, and I've got not a promoter, a publicist, who's now working with me on my second book. We've got a good friendship, but she's saying I can't get these venues. I can't get people. I can't get this bird. I can't think of this. I said, what about the Today Show? It got back, says they don't do wrestlers. They don't do wrestlers. And then I get a call about the New York Times. And Jennifer Suter was her name's Jennifer Robinson. Still in touch after all these years with my old publicist. She goes, I've got some great news. I go, what is it? She goes, the New York Times is doing an article on you. I said, well, that is good. She reprimands me. She goes, no, that's not good. That's great. That's great as in it's the greatest thing that could ever happen to you. So I got a little nervous at first that they were coming out there to bury me, New York Times. So I remember calling Barry Blaustein, director of Beyond the Mat, and told him the deal. And he goes, Mick, he said, wrestler writes novel is a good story. Wrestler writes novel and it stinks is not a good story. They're not coming to your house to write that story. And that made sense, right? Yeah. So the woman comes out, she does a wonderful job. They release something, I think it's on the front page of the art section, and immediately all these outlets that said no are saying not just yes, but when yes, tomorrow. Yeah, when can you? People magazine's out at the house. I get asked, and I said, can you, Jennifer says, can you be on the Today Show tomorrow? And I said, I thought they didn't do wrestlers. She goes, they're doing you. So can I walk you through my Today Show experience, right? Please. She says, Katie Couric is going to be doing the interview. I like Katie. She goes, well, Katie can be tough. I said, well, yeah, she's tough, but she's fair. And that was the only thing I was concerned with was, people being fair. Yeah. So I go out. It's a 5-minute segment. And the first couple questions are a little tough about the content of the show. And then it lightens up a little bit. She says, I also understand you've written a children's book. And I said, well, yes, I have. And I believe both my book and yours were on the New York Times bestseller list at the same time. And then I'll never forget the feeling of Katie Couric's hand on my knee. And she says, may I say, it was a pleasure to be on that list with you. Right? And so we finish our thing, and as I'm walking through, they got the big soundproof doors, right? So I open up the door, and as that door is slowly closing, and it's about this much before closing, so I can actually hear what's going on, I hear her go, he was cute. And I didn't take that to mean like, oh, he was hot cute, like cutie patootie was the word going around. Like, I just think she had an image in her mind of what a wrestler was going to be. Yeah. And so the next day, I get a call from Jennifer, and she said, guess who wants you? I said, the Today Show. I said, who? She said, the Today Show. I said, but I was just on the Today Show. And she said, as soon as they heard that you had another children's book coming out, this would be Halloween Hijinks, they booked you for Halloween Day. So I'd go the real mature route. I said, does that mean Katie likes me?
Oh my gosh, that's
and
so
she
great.
said, it means someone likes you because they just booked you 5 months in advance. So now I start having friction with the company. The friction is that because I mentioned in the New York Times article that I would like to write a novel. So Judith Regan of Regan Books, who WWE had their deal with and have just ended their deal, but she's the one I did my first two, the first two memoirs with, and I had a good relationship with Judith. She makes me an offer, sight unseen, on a book I haven't even written. And I tell her I would feel better about actually writing it before we... Yeah, well, maybe that makes me a mark,
No,
they're not. But I wasn't sure I could do it, and I wanted to make sure it was good. And as soon as WWE gets wind of the fact that I have an offer, that's when Mr. McMahon, which could be his Achilles heel, the control factor, decides he does not want that novel outside of WWE.
So you can do another book, but it has to be with his partner.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
And this is where, if there's a great scene, there's a lot of great scenes in the Get Back documentary, The Beatles. It's really extensive. While I was watching it, I watched all 3 episodes. There's about 2 hours to each episode. I watched all 6 in a row. And at a certain point, you're like, man, there's some busy work going on here. I don't know if we need all this. But then when you see it as a total thing, you can understand, you get to see the nuts and the bolts and everything that works. And there's this scene that could have saved the Beatles where George Harrison says to John, just kind of offhandedly, he says, I only get 1 or 2 songs an album. I'm not going to do a George Harrison.
Yeah.
He said, I've got all these songs. I'd like to do my own thing. Do you think that would be okay? And John says, yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't. And Paul later was asked about it. He said, recently, could that have saved the Beatles? He said, yeah, I think it could have. If everybody would have been allowed to go out and do their own thing, you could have kept that group. I think I'm considering me and Vince to be the Beatles. Right. And I was the guy that wanted to do my outside project. And I just, as stupid as it sounds, I just didn't want the I didn't want the logo on it. And I remember talking to JR. I don't mean to
cut you off, but was that a point of pride about, I want to be able to prove that I can do this on my own?
Yeah. Hey, look, you go outside the auspices of WWE, out of the friendly confines, but it can also be a little bit constricting. Yeah. And I just wanted to do my own thing and have it out there. You can ask Barry Bloom about this sometime, where JR goes, well, hell, he goes, I said, Chair, what happens if you guys don't like the novel I wrote? He said, I don't see why we wouldn't like it. It's not like there's anything about anal sex in there. I went, actually, the book went some dark places. Yeah. And so it's like battering heads with WWE. At the same time, I've got this appointment, this thing coming up with the Today Show. And for the first time ever, a talent asked that WWE be banned from the studio. Wow. So I heard, I think Gary was I can't remember his last name, he was the head of PR at that time, and I called up and he told me they were going to have a team there. I said, no, absolutely not. This is something I was asked to do because they liked me. My children are going to be there. My wife's going to be there. I don't want you guys. I may have dropped an F-bomb on them, but I probably just said messing it up. And then I called WWE. I called the Today Show producer, said I didn't want WWE in the building, and I had them banned from the building. Wow. So we had a great time, right? It's a great time. It's a tough time in America because it's post 9/11. Yeah. So we've got to dress out. There's no green rooms open. You have to dress out in the hallway. NBC Studios had something mailed to them, powder, whether it was legit or not, I don't know. But it was a scary time in America. And here I've got this moment to rejoice be with my family. We meet Soledad O'Brien, who tells us she grew up in the house next door to the one we just moved into.
Oh, wow.
And thus begins a 20-year friendship with Soledad O'Brien. I turn from my conversation with Soledad, and I don't see little Mickey, who's not quite a year old. He's about 10 months old. I said, "Where's Mickey?" And my wife says, "Katie has him." And I look out, and Katie's holding my son, who's dressed like a pumpkin, to close the show. And I thought at that time, this is one of the great moments of my life.
Of course.
One of the things we get to do is decide our own WrestleMania moments. This is at a time when I hadn't quite come to terms with the legacy of the Hell in a Cell, and accepted that it was an incredible moment.
Yeah.
Not just in wrestling, but not just in my life, but in wrestling as well. And at that point, I was like, hey, if you want to consider that moment where I was knocked unconscious and ended up with a tooth in my nose and scared my family to death, you want to consider that a great moment in my life, that's not for you to decide, right? Like, you consider that a great moment. And now I do. But I was like, I'm going to go with Katie holding my child to end the Today Show.
On national TV.
So I'm just telling you, the friction, it wasn't good. I went to JR. We had a meeting at Nassau Coliseum.
So wait, does he call the meeting because you banned him from? How does that go?
I can't remember if we spoke on the phone or if we had the meeting at Nassau Coliseum where I wasn't even booked on the show. I'd come back in as their commissioner for a far less successful second run. It only lasted 4 or 5 weeks because I clearly wasn't happy there. And JR said, heard about the Today Show. I said, yeah. Has anyone ever done that before? He said, can't say that they have. And then he said, Mick, Vince and I feel like we are at a part in this relationship where if we force you to stay, the relationship will be harmed, inexorably. I'm probably not saying that correctly. You get the idea. It would be
it's going to go sour.
Yeah, it's going to go sour. But if we were to let you go now, because I'd asked to be let out of my contract a year early, we let you go now, we think we're in a position where we can work together again. And does that sound right? I said, yeah, I think it does. He said, well, consider this your release. I go walking away. There's a ramp that goes up to the parking lot at Nassau Coliseum. The last person I see is Stacy Keibler. And I'd always had a good relationship with Stacy. And I walked past, I said goodbye. She was, are you leaving? And I said, yeah. And I gave her a hug. And I walk about another 10 yards and I come back and I said, in this business, just because something usually is a certain way doesn't mean it needs to be that way. And she looks at me and says, are you talking about my boobs? And I said, actually, I am talking about your boobs. And she said, don't worry, I'm not getting a boob job. And I went, okay. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk to her about because I thought there might be pressure on her.
Had you heard that there would be pressure?
No, I had not heard that.
You just knew, though.
I could just see that one of these things is not like the other. And I think that's good, And
makes her different.
I mean, everything makes different. And we think we've learned that lesson with the women now that not everybody goes for the same look. There's some widely divergent styles, on the women's end, and that's great for the business. But that was the last thing I said for a year and a half. And then I did call them up.
Any conversation with Vince after that?
I don't believe so.
I know you've had a on again, off again relationship, but despite that, would there still be birthday and Christmas messages, sort of thing?
No more Vince and Linda singing happy birthday together on my recorder, or my recording machine. Like it was in 2000. Never hit that height again. I can't tell you for a fact that we didn't have any communication.
It wasn't warm, though.
Yeah, it wasn't great. But in the meantime, I was still in touch with Sue Aitchison. She knew I lived on Long Island, and I did things, for free for the company. They're involved in a lot of great organizations.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was completely shut out, but I hadn't been on TV in any way, shape, or form. Except when I'd be featured or be one of those guys who was losing to one of the current stars in a video package. And I always thought that was a great honor to be thought of highly enough to be in somebody's package. Yeah. I'm not sure that came out the way I wanted it.
I know what you mean.
So that's setting the stage for the phone call I give Vince because I just thought I could come in and add something to the Hell in a Cell with Triple H and Kevin Nash. And I remember the Raw was held in Miami, and I was scared, right? Like, I thought I was gone for good. I remember like looking at the clock. Well, not at my watch, because I've never had a watch, but looking at the clock, 15 minutes late, 30 minutes late, hour late. All right, I'd better go. I kind of hung outside the door longer than I would have, and I opened up the door, and the first person I saw was Stacy Keibler. And she came over running into my arms, because she was with Test at the time. And she knew that bothered Test when she jumped into my arms in a fun way. And from there, it was like, I'd just been there yesterday. So we do this angle. You want to allude to the angle?
Yeah,
Okay.
Before we get going, I just want to find out, were you thinking you were going to actually get back in the ring? Did you? So none of that was planned?
No, none of that was planned. I was still $3 bills and change at that time, but I thought I could add something to the Hell in a Cell.
The show.
Yeah.